Good day, good people. This is Inanna Joy, and I decided to pull over for a few minutes and share with y'all my thoughts in response to a video posted by the brilliant Ostefco recently about this idea that a lot of the Gen Z women in particular have decided that having a boyfriend is passé. Not only is it passé, but it's embarrassing. This whole idea of decentering men and not wanting to be pick-me's, it's the big pushback against the ills of this patriarchal society in which we live and all of the problems that it has caused women. We now have yet another surge of young women who are rightfully deconstructing ideas around love and long-term relationships, questioning what it actually means to be a woman in these partnerships, and trying, their damnedest to settle into a way of life that honors who they are and actually supports their well-being and helps them to enhance their well-being. Well, I can't say that I am in opposition to that. They have to find their way in the same way that all generations have found their way. And when I think about the ways in which different generations have viewed marriage and relationships, it puts me in mind of something that I don't hear very many people talk about. And maybe you have some people, particularly in the pockets of the Black conscious community, who I've heard talk about this from time to time, but I don't hear a lot of folks talk about where some of this "we don't need no man" concept originated. You have a lot of podcast bros and men who like to get on these here interwebs and disparage women for the independent woman mindset. And of course, as someone who is an advocate of the love revolution, the real evolution of both men and women, I'm an advocate of us trying to find ways to have more balanced and equitable partnerships with one another. I certainly am not one of these people who would say that men don't need women or women don't need men in regards to heterosexual relationships and raising families and all of that. We have got to find a way to live in a balanced fashion with one another. It is utterly unrealistic and fantastical to assume that we can live without one another for very long. We got to figure out a way to get along. It's real easy to say, let's cut each other off and not deal with each other anymore. But in the real world, we got to figure out how to work together. If you're a heterosexual woman who is stuck with men, in terms of your sexual preferences, if you're a heterosexual man who's stuck with women, I focus on this subject because we gotta at some point grow up and figure out how to work together. But I'm talking about the origins of these ideas. Like I said, you got a lot of men and some women who jump on here and talk about how horrible it is that you have so many single mothers and so many women out here who beat the drum of "we don't need no man." But did you remember where that came from? I grew up during the period of time when rap music, which had such a potential for consciousness raising and for elevating people's mindsets, was co-opted and taken on by this whole idea of gangster rap. In the same way that blaxploitation films did a really good job of denigrating and damaging the images of Black folks during the time period that they were popular. This second wave or other wave of denigration, destruction of the Black image came forth through gangster rap. And I know a lot of y'all are gonna be pissed off with me for saying that, but it's just the truth. We have several generations of young people who were raised on music in which rappers bragged about, for one, sleeping with underage girls, for two, raping women, and where the general demeanor of men was, we don't need these bitches, we don't need these hoes. Women were reduced to bitches and hoes, and you spent a generation telling us how much you couldn't stand us, how much you didn't want or need us, how much you just wanted to use us, how much you would prefer to stand on corners and lay up in jail cells and sit up in basements or on basketball courts with your musty, rusty tail friends, with your bros, which always came before the hoes. You spent a generation telling us, and when I say us, I'm making the choice to say us because, you know, we would always have those entertainers that would get in these interviews whenever they were challenged about those kinds of lyrics, and they would say, oh, well, we're only talking about a specific type of woman. But we see in what came out, you know, about the kinds of relationships that these men were in, it didn't matter the kind of women that they were with. They always treated them like shit, right? It doesn't matter what kind of woman you are. It doesn't matter what line of respectability you toe. These men who carry this mentality treat all women the same, like trash. So this mentality, it's important for us to understand how this and all of these ideas that we're being fed constantly through the music, through the entertainment, it's important to remember that, for one, advertising wouldn't be a multi-billion-dollar industry if the things that we hear and see on a regular basis did not influence us, right? So when you take into consideration the fact that there was a full generation of music that came forth where this was the drum beat, it's easy to understand why you now have droves of women, you know, several generations of women who have come out now, you know, with the retort, well, if we ain't shit to y'all, we don't need y'all, you know. So the PsyOp program was very successful. Year after year, decade after decade, generation after generation, women have tried to talk to men. They've tried screaming from the rooftops. They've tried grabbing the megaphone and getting the attention of men. We need you to evolve. We need you to treat us like human beings. And you know what? That doesn't work, because who was it? Asada Shakur that said that no oppressed people, I'm paraphrasing, no oppressed people has ever gained their freedom by appealing to the moral sense of their oppressor. Because when the oppressor is in full oppression mode, the oppressor has no morals. So while I can, you know, write books like, you know, Fuck Submission, Ending the Gender Wars for Good, which is going to be coming out in January of 2026, while I can write books like that encourage evolved men and women to come together in a new dynamic of friendship and interaction and partnership that does not involve this domination and submission dynamic, while I am very much an advocate for that, I also recognize that there is only a small percentage of the population that is going to make that choice to evolve. And there has to be some self-protection measures in place for us to protect our physical safety, our sanity, our peace, because you never know when you're going to encounter someone who's evolved and when, you know, you're not. Yes, you can increase the likelihood of encountering other evolved people by placing yourself in certain environments and by, you know, raising your own consciousness, raising your own vibration, as they say, so that you invite more of those kinds of people into your orbit. But we still live in a world where we have to deal with each other. The wheat and the tares are still among us. So we have to learn how to protect ourselves when we encounter those folks who are not evolved. So I totally understand why, as Ostefco mentioned in her very insightful video, why some young women are staunch advocates for this idea of decentering men, and why they are really deeply examining these ideas, and why we have movements like the 4B movement that has come about. You know, you don't get the drastic changes that are needed by going with the flow. And sometimes, even if you come across as a little crazy, even if some people don't understand, even if some people call you a little extreme, you have to break shit in order to make change, in order to just get, you know, sometimes the bare minimum of what you should get as a full-blooded human being walking this earth who deserves a basic modicum of respect and humanity. You know, as much as a lot of modern women like to pride themselves on their understanding of and their expression of feminist ideals in the way that they live their lives, many of them still make one of feminism's fatal errors in following the lead of men. They just try to act like the unevolved men whose principles and ways of being in the world got us to the shitty point that we're at today. Men, if you truly wanted to be the leaders, you probably should not have led us into the fifth circle of hell. And women, if you want to get away from the toxic mentalities, the bad ideas that got us to where we are now, you have to stop following the lead of toxic men. You have to stop following the path of division and hyper individualism that assumes that we can live as if we're islands. We have to stop the warring and the useless fighting against one another when we really aren't each other's real enemy. It's pretty clear to see who the real enemies are right now if you're paying attention. We're never going to get where we're trying to go without being balanced. You don't have to submit to bullshit, and you also don't have to maroon yourself on an island of unrealistic ideas. We have to find the balance, people. You don't have to become the submissive trad wife slave, but you're also not going to get very far with the divisiveness. Might work for self-protection in the meantime, in the same way that some of our natural coping mechanisms as human beings, some of the psychological mechanisms that automatically come into play when we're under stress, when children are growing up in abusive situations like that, situations of extreme abuse, those psychological factors kick in to protect us in the meantime, to get us through to a safe place. But at some point, you have to learn to live in balance on the individual level and on the collective level. We've got to do the real work to figure out how to live in a balanced fashion with one another, how to get in community with other evolved men and women. But until then, I guess, let the games continue, because I see you trying to figure it out. I am too. This is Inanna Joy, sharing a few of the things that I've learned and some things that I'm still learning with you. Thanks for jumping in the joy well with me, where we examine what it means to grow and to live and love through life's joy, pain, sunshine, or rain. In the joy well, you will follow your bliss to your purpose. You will align with your joy and live well. See you soon.